Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are doing something, well, something that might make your jaw drop a little bit.
Just a little.
Usually, we're looking at tech trends or history, productivity hacks. But today, we've got our hands on a source that reads like a literal instruction manual
Instruction manual is exactly the right phrase.
for a lifestyle that almost everyone has a strong opinion on, but, very few people actually understand the logistics of.
It is definitely a departure for us.
We are talking about polygyny, and I want to be super clear right off the bat. We aren't doing a moral debate today. We are not asking, is this right or is this wrong?
Yeah.
We are looking at a specific text. It's called A Practical Guide to Polygyny by a South African author, Coach De Bruyns. And this book, it's all nuts and bolts. It's purely mechanical.
That's what makes it so fascinating to analyze. Most writing on this is either, religious apologetics or just angry condemnation.
Right.
De Bruyns assumes you already want to do it. He's just there to tell you how to install the plumbing, so to speak.
It reads like a manual on how to rebuild a car engine, except the engine is a family with multiple spouses.
Exactly. Finances, housing, conflict resolution, and yes, even very specific instructions on sexual hygiene.
We'll get there. So the author positions himself as someone reclaiming traditional masculinity, and he is very, very blunt.
He pulls no punches. And our mission here is just to report on the system he proposes. It's a glimpse into a worldview that sees family not as a romantic fairy tale, but as a disciplined enterprise.
To keep us grounded, because this gets abstract fast, we're going to use the narrative anchor that the book itself uses. There's this fictional case study woven through the chapters about a guy named Bilal.
Right, Bilal, the man in the arena.
So Bilal starts out monogamous. He's married to Aisha. They have kids. Life is chaotic. And eventually he decides to bring in a second wife, Mariam.
So we get to see the theory in practice.
We're going to shadow Bilal to see how these rules actually play out in, a Tuesday afternoon reality. It helps to visualize it.
It does, because the theory is one thing, but the practice, that's where the friction happens.
Okay, so let's start where the author starts, the why. I think for most modern listeners, the first question is just, why on earth would you invite this level of complication into your life?
Well, De Bruyns starts with a biological argument. He claims men and women have fundamentally different mating strategies.
Okay.
He says women are wired for exclusivity. They want the best quality provider they can find. But men, he says men are wired for diversity and quantity.
He used a phrase that really stuck out to me. Something about monogamy being anti-man.
Yes. He argues that monogamy forces a feminine imperative onto masculine biology. He believes that for a man, having options is the natural state. But here's the part that usually trips people up.
Go on.
He claims that a man who has multiple wives is actually more attractive to women, not less.
Wait, hold on. That sounds completely backwards. Logically, wouldn't most women run for the hills if they found out a guy already had a wife?
You'd think so.
You're sharing resources, you're sharing time. How does having a partner make you more attractive?
You would think so. But De Bruyns argues it triggers a psychological mechanism he calls pre-selection.
Pre-selection.
The idea is that if other women have already vetted you, lived with you, and agreed to stay with you, you must have resources. You must have leadership skills.
So it's like a stamp of approval.
Exactly. He compares it to the difference between a virgin and a player. He says women are instinctually drawn to the man who has experience because the market has already validated him.
Okay, so that's the biological pitch. But he draws a really hard line when it comes to how you pursue this. I was expecting him to be a bit loose, but he is strictly against secrecy.
This is his own it rule. He spends a lot of time distinguishing polygyny from an affair. He says affairs are about deception, they're cowardly.
Right.
Polygyny, in his view, is about honesty. If you can't look your first wife in the eye and tell her your intentions, De Bruyns says you aren't man enough to have two wives.
Let's bring in Bilal here. In the beginning, Bilal is struggling. He's coming home late. The house is a mess. Aisha is exhausted with the kids. There's no dinner. He's frustrated.
Right, and he thinks a second wife will fix his dirty dishes problem. He thinks, if I have two wives, the house will be clean and everyone will be happy.
But the author warns that if you don't establish the ground rules up front, you're just doubling your chaos.
Exactly, and there's a timeline, right? A specific window for doing this.
The 3-year rule. This is fascinating. He advises men to marry the second wife within the first 3 years of the first marriage.
3 years? That seems incredibly fast. You're barely settled into the first marriage.
That's his point. He says if you wait at 10 or 15 years, the first wife gets comfortable in monogamy. She builds her identity around being the only one.
So you rip the Band-Aid off early?
It establishes that this is a polygynous household from the foundation up. It's brutal but strategic. Okay, so Bilal decides to do it. He tells Aisha. He finds Miriam. Now, we hit the wall that I think keeps most people up at night. Money.
Right. How do you pay for this?
How does Bilal actually afford this?
This is where the book shifts from biology to economics. Because supporting two separate households, it's impossible for the average guy. So De Bruyns proposes what he calls the enterprise model.
Which basically sounds like running a company.
It is. He explicitly says polygyny is an enterprise. He suggests pooling resources. So let's say Bilal earns a salary, but maybe Aisha works too, or maybe Miriam brings in income.
It all goes into one central pot.
All of it. No separate accounts. The husband acts as the CEO. He manages the overhead rent, food, utilities, and then allocates stipends. But the real economic hack he proposes is labor.
What do you mean by that?
Think about childcare. It's incredibly expensive. De Bruyns suggests that in a polygynous home, you can have specialization.
Oh, interesting.
Maybe Miriam is career-focused and wants to work a corporate job. Maybe Aisha prefers to be a homemaker. Aisha raises all the kids while Miriam and Bilal bring in the cash.
So you're internalizing the childcare costs. You're not paying a stranger.
Exactly. The money stays in the family. It's an economy of scale.
And that sounds great on paper, but I'm imagining the living situation. I mean, if you're pooling resources, does that mean everyone is living in one big house? Because that just sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It is, and the author knows it. He strongly advises against what he calls the commune setup, where everyone is on top of each other. He references the Zulu kraal system.
Okay, unpack that for us. What is a kraal?
Historically, it's a compound. You have separate huts for each wife, but they face a central communal area. The key is visual separation. De Bruyns is very specific about sightlines.
Or sightlines.
Yes. If wife A can see into wife B's bedroom from her kitchen window, you have failed. He says you need distinct territories. If you can't afford separate apartments, you need to use curtains, dividers, drywall, whatever it takes.
So no intimacy in view of the other wife?
Never. He says that creates visceral jealousy. You have to create the illusion of total privacy within the collective.
And amidst all this construction advice, he drops a tip for the husband that I found hilarious, but he's dead serious about it. The man cave.
Oh, this is non-negotiable for him. He says that dealing with the emotional needs of multiple women and, a dozen kids is exhausting.
Right.
If the husband doesn't have a place to retreat, a literal room with a lock or a studio apartment nearby, he will burn out. He needs a space where he is not a husband or a father, just a man.
He needs a hideout.
Yeah.
You can't lead the ship if you're drowning in the noise of the crew.
That's his argument.
Speaking of leading the ship, let's talk about time management. Bilal has 2 wives now. He has the money sorted. He has the walls up. How does he decide where to sleep?
The rotation system. The text suggests keeping it simple. 2 nights with Aisha, 2 nights with Miriam. It creates a rhythm. But here is where the frame concept comes in.
Frame. That term kept popping up. What does he mean by that?
It's a concept from the manosphere. It basically means your reality, your emotional stability. The author uses the example of lateness. Let's say Bilal is stuck in traffic coming from Aisha's house to Miriam's. He's an hour late. Miriam is fuming.
Rightfully so.
In a normal marriage, you'd apologize, you'd explain, maybe grovel a bit. De Bruyns says, do not do that.
Don't apologize.
No. He says if you start explaining, you look weak. You are the leader. You walk in, you ignore the attitude, and you proceed with your evening. He believes that if you react to her emotions, you're entering her frame. You need to pull her into yours.
That is incredibly authoritarian.
It is. He argues that in a system this complex, democracy leads to anarchy. The husband has to be the unshakable rock, even if it makes him seem cold.
Which leads us perfectly into the dynamics section. You're going to talk about maintenance.
Yeah.
And the manual gets incredibly specific about, well, intimacy and hygiene.
It treats sex almost like a technical skill that needs to be managed for the health of the collective.
I have to stop you on the hygiene part. I was reading the notes, and he has this very specific take on soap. Did I read that right?
You did, and it's probably the most idiosyncratic health tip in the book. He advises against using soap on your full body every day.
Why? Is he against being clean?
No, he's obsessed with being clean, but he has this theory about the body's biome. He thinks harsh soaps kill the healthy bacteria and pheromones that make a man attractive, so he suggests water-only washing for the chest and arms on some days.
But then he completely flips the script for the private parts.
Right. There, he is militant. He introduces the concept of ghusl, which is a ritual washing from Islamic tradition. He insists that a man must wash thoroughly between partners. He uses this visceral phrase.
You must not carry the remnants of one wife to another.
That's the one. It's about respect, but also about preventing infections. He views the man as a potential vector for disease between the women.
So the protocol is strict. And what about the performance aspect? He makes some bold claims about the stamina of polygynous men.
He argues they become masters through sheer volume of practice. If you're satisfying 2 or 3 women, your control changes. He even gives technical advice on hip adjustments and angles to delay ejaculation.
It's all so mechanical.
Yeah.
Utilitarian.
Exactly. Sex isn't just for fun. It's a duty he has to fulfill to keep the peace.
Okay, let's look at the emotional side of that piece. Conflict.
Yeah.
We mentioned Bilal and Miriam earlier. In the book, they hit a major snag. Miriam wants to go back to work.
This is a pivotal moment in the case study. Bilal wants Miriam focused on the home, but she's bored or she wants her own money. She gives him an ultimatum. She's taking a job.
And in a normal marriage, you discuss this compromise.
Yeah.
What does Bilal do?
He applies the no free ride principle. He tells her, fine, you can work. But if you work, you are removing your labor from the household enterprise. So you must pay your own bills from now on.
Okay.
And, this is the kicker, you have to pay Aisha for childcare.
Wow, he makes her pay the first wife.
Yes. He monetizes the domestic labor. He's saying that staying home has a financial value. If Miriam outsources her share of the raising to Aisha, she has to compensate Aisha for it.
It really reinforces that CEO model. It's so transactional.
It is. The text explicitly says democracy doesn't work in a family. Someone has to break the tie. And that person is the husband.
There's another rule about conflict that seemed very isolating. He says you can't talk to anyone outside the family about your problems.
The in-house rule. He forbids venting to your mother, your sisters, or your friends.
Because they'll just tell you to leave.
Exactly. He says outsiders will always view your problems through a monogamous lens. They'll say that's abusive or that's unfair. If you bring those voices in, the system collapses. You have to resolve it within the walls of the kraal.
So this lifestyle is clearly not for everyone. The text actually has a whole section on selection. Who actually fits this mold?
Because it sounds exhausting.
Yeah, it does. And he has very specific criteria. He starts with a warning about Western women. He basically says, don't marry Americans.
Right. Or Brits, or anyone from a highly liberalized culture. He argues that modern Western individualism is incompatible with the hardware of polygyny.
That's an interesting way to put it. Software versus hardware.
He thinks that if a woman believes her primary goal in life is self-actualization or finding herself, she will destroy a polygynous home. He advises men to look for women from patriarchal cultures who understand the collective.
Women who prioritize the tribe over the self.
Right, and the word obedience comes up a lot. And linked to that is his obsession with virginity. He argues that a woman's value is tied to her chastity.
But the man's value increases with experience.
That's the double standard he defends as biological fact. He says a woman gives a piece of herself with every partner, whereas a man gains status. It's controversial, but it's the bedrock of his selection process.
On the flip side, what does he tell women to look for? Because if I'm a woman signing up for this, I need to know the guy can actually handle it.
You need a general. The text warns women, do not marry a lapdog. If a man is lazy, if he's out of shape, if he can't keep a promise, he will fail.
And there was one specific red flag that surprised me. He warns against men who have a lot of female friends.
Yes, this is his intent versus promiscuity distinction.
Why? Isn't having female friends just being social?
Not in this worldview. The author argues that a true polygynous man is intentional. If he likes a woman, he marries her. He takes on the financial and legal burden of her care.
A man who just hangs out with lots of women is a time waster.
He wants the fun without the bills. Exactly.
Yeah.
De Bruyns is trying to rebrand polygyny not as some hedonistic party for men, but as the ultimate burden of responsibility.
He says, if you want to sleep around, stay single. If you want to build an empire, get wives.
An empire. That really is the vibe of the whole book. It's about legacy, building a tribe.
So we've covered the mindset, the money, the housing, the sex, the selection. As we wrap up, what is the final takeaway from Coach De Bruyns? Because after all this discipline, I'm wondering, is he happy?
He ends with an argument for normalcy. He claims that if you look at human history, the isolated monogamous nuclear family is the weird anomaly. He argues that tribal, polygynous living is how humans survived for millennia,
So he thinks we are the weird ones for living in our little boxes.
essentially. But he leaves the reader, and especially the men, with the final provocative thought. It's about contentment.
Which seems so ironic for a book about wanting more wives.
Right. But he says that eventually, no matter how many wives you have, 2, 3, 4, you have to decide this is enough. You have to stop looking.
Because there's always someone younger, or...
Always. And here's the paradox. He suggests that the discipline required to be successfully polygynous, to manage the jealousy, the money, the time, the fairness, is actually higher than the discipline required for monogamy.
So if you think having 2 wives is going to be double the fun...
It's actually triple the work. And if you aren't content with yourself, adding another person to the mix just amplifies your own chaos.
That is a fascinating place to land. It's not a free-for-all. It's a high-stakes management job.
With no days off.
Except in the man cave.
Except in the man cave.
Well, that is certainly a deep dive into a manual most of us would never see. Whether you find it archaic or intriguing, you have to admit, it forces you to look at the mechanics of relationships in a completely different light.
It certainly does. It strips away the romance and shows you the gears turning underneath.
Thanks for listening. We will catch you on the next deep dive.